little bit. Um, I love if you all could just tell us about your work and how you all got started in the environmental movement, about where you are now and about what you currently do. So how about we start with Leslie, if you could just tell us a little bit about how you got started in the environmental movement, briefly within 2 minutes, and about what you do now.
Good afternoon. I am thrilled to be here. Thank you so much. This is one of the premier EJ conferences in the country, if not the world. So I am thrilled to be with my dear friends and meet new friends. And thank you all so much. I am the National Director for Policy, Advocacy, and Legal at the Sierra Club in Washington, DC. The Sierra Club is the oldest, largest environmental organization. We have 63 or 64 chapters, thousands of volunteers. And I've been there 14 years. And I basically started out in doing volunteer work many years ago, over 20 years ago, well, actually longer than that. I had an interest in farm worker advocacy in law school here in Washington, DC, and took that interest in health and pesticides. And when I lived in Texas, and I volunteered and helped the Texas NAACP and volunteered and joined the Sierra Club, the Lone Star chapter at the time, and basically created positions for myself that meld my interest in law and policy, international issues, and my concern for health, and into environmental justice work at the Texas Lone Star chapter, and also in some other organizations, and did it also internationally. And I've done a lot of different things. I've worked in government, I've worked private sector a long time ago, but I've been very blessed to work in EJ and to work in an organization that lets me be an entrepreneur in EJ and lets us really come together to support communities who are really suffering from the legacies of our, genocide, colonial past, slavery of Native Americans and African Americans, terrible, Reconstruction, and then Jim Crow, violent racial justice and terrorism, to redlining, to now gentrification and other problems. So it's all intersection, it's all connected, but I think it's really joyous work. Some of my dearest friends are on this call. I meet the best people doing EJ, and so I think it's been a blessing and calling for me. And I work and run the maintain and support our Fed policy teams. We have a state program, we have a democracy program, so we're able to integrate the issues around voting rights and civic participation, and we have an environmental law program. And so I ascended to that position last year, so we're able to do the best we can and work with a lot of folks all around the country. So it's great to be able to now really hold this administration to account for, and also to remedy and also promote the solutions that the communities are the ones who know best on the ground to the national and national levels. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Just a wealth of knowledge is what I'm hearing, and of experience and of work and pushing this work in our world forward. How about we go to Adrienne next? 2 minutes. How did you get started in the environmental movement, and what are you doing now?
You gonna stop me too. Anyway, I am Adrienne Hollis. I'm the Senior Climate Justice and Health Scientist at the Union of Concerned Scientists for 8 more days. Before that, I worked at various law firms in different capacities. I have a PhD and a JD. And I guess the reason I have a JD is because of my work in environmental justice, because communities pretty much were in conversations identified that what they needed was, people who could work with them to interpret what government agencies were saying when it came to contamination. And so I left. I was an associate professor at Florida A&M University, and I left that position to go to law school in 2007. So a big gap between my PhD and my JD. But for the past almost 2 years, I've been, in addition to the work that I do as a climate justice and health, I work at the intersection of public health, environmental racism, environmental justice, and most recently climate change. Climate change, COVID, and of course the new variants that exist. In addition to that, because of, I'm sure people know about a number of issues that happened at UCS. I've really been focusing with a group of great people on issues around making UCS an anti-racist organization. And so that is in addition to the regular work that I do. And part of that is working with Dr. Jacob Carter to we had a series of workshops talking about how to incorporate equity into your work. And so it's just about understanding and emphasizing the importance of community involvement and partnership and sometimes leadership in the work that we do. So I'm very happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. And I should mention that Adrienne and I are co-workers for, I guess, the next 8 days. I recently started working at the Union of Concerned Scientists as a senior energy campaign manager. How about we have Andrés next? 2 minutes.
2 minutes, Elise, how you doing? This is great. We all made it on. It was we were nervous, but here we all are. We get to hang out with our awesome colleagues and talk about these critical and important issues. So that's great. That's a great way to wrap up the day when you got friendly faces and a really important topic to talk about. So that's great. So I'm Andrés Jimenez, the Executive Director of Green 2.0. I've been here for all of a year, maybe a year and a month. It's been a fantastic ride so far. What brought me here is this passion, concern, fear, and this thought that we can be doing better. We should all be doing better. Every organization, every foundation can be always doing better. We need to be working on things that should have already been happening. We need to make sure that we are providing a pathway for youth, that we're providing and showing that current staff, former staff, that they deserve better. Organizations need to have a firm mission of a culture that is inviting and a culture that is welcoming, because if we are not all working on this, if we are not all making sure that the culture is right in our mission, how can we advance issues like climate change? How can we all work together to move forward? The table, we need to have a voice at the table. We need to be heard as a community. Communities of color bring so much background diversity, wonderful experiences. And if we're leaving them out of the conversation, if we're saying, no, let's just have someone else talk for these communities, what are we doing? We're failing everyone. We're failing the movement. We're failing what we're trying to accomplish, which is to try to make communities better, healthier, and safer. So what led me to this, to backtrack a little bit, is working, whether it was in immigration and then working at different environmental organizations. I've always seen the same thing, and it's these so-called tables are all run by the same kind of person. They are not led by those who have these experiences and these diverse backgrounds, these unique experiences. They are not the ones speaking. They are not the ones saying, this is what's happening on the ground. It's someone else who says, I think this is what's happening. I've seen, but they don't know. And why? Why do we continue to let that happen? And so when I saw the amazing work that Green 2.0 had been doing, and I saw that there was an opening to come on as an executive director and take Green 2.0 to the next level and work and partner with communities and organizations and foundations, I took it because we need strong leadership. And I've always said, Green 2.0 can't do this work alone. We need everyone, foundations, organizations, members of Congress, the administration. We need everyone working together to make this happen. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the work you're doing and the authenticity that you bring to it as well. We'll go to Patrice and then Kristi.
Awesome. Thank you, Elise. So good to be here, to see old friends, and to get this group together. I will say I want to echo Leslie's comment at the beginning about the appreciation for this forum and this annual event. It is tremendous, and the conversations that have been happening over the course of the day have been just incredible. And it's so important that we do this and support it and participate in it. And I'm honored to be able to participate in this small way. So I will focus on the question and give you a sense of how I got involved in the environmental justice movement and sort of where I am and what I do. And I'll caveat all of this by saying I'm not fundamentally an environmental justice lawyer, right? I don't live in the community that's grappling with issues. What I do is I'm an environmental lawyer. I have the benefit of having access to resources, and I understand the absolute importance of advancing environmental justice as one of the most critical things that we can be doing in the environmental movement at this moment, and put a lot of energy into driving resources and benefits to the communities that need it most. And I know we're going to talk a lot about what that looks like as we move through this panel. So how did I get into this? Well, I started as an environmental lawyer. Lawyering was at least my second career, but I've always been focused on service to communities that I've come from, communities that I've been associated with. I got into lawyering, ended up starting my career at EPA in the Office of General Counsel, having come out of Howard University School of Law, knowing that I wanted to be out doing something that mattered, that was policy oriented, and that was providing public service. So I stayed at EPA for about 7 years, ended up leaving and joining NRDC because I wanted to be doing more advocacy. I've been doing sort of policy making and rulemaking stuff, and then really become an expert in environmental laws, especially the Clean Air Act and clean air issues and how they work. But I wanted to be doing advocacy work, and there was an opportunity to do that. And as it turns out, I started my work at NRDC about 2 weeks after Hurricane Katrina and Rita had hit New Orleans and the Gulf, and was almost immediately thrown into the response that was absolutely critical at the moment. And at that point had very little exposure in the environmental context to environmental justice issues. Had not known much about environmental issues or environmental law before law school, and sort of found my way into this field, backed into it, if you will. And that was an incredibly eye-opening experience. Leslie was there with me for much of that and became a real mentor and guide for me in the context of doing environmental justice work and understanding the environmental justice landscape. We got to do some really incredible work in the region with folks like Bob Bullard and Beverly Wright, and interacted with folks like the Huma Nation tribe in the region who were heavily affected by those the issues there, and that really was transformative for me. I ended up spending about 4 years at NRDC, during which time Leslie and I started a clinical program at Howard University School of Law to bring more lawyers of color into this work, precisely for the reasons that Adrienne pointed out earlier, that it was so important to have people who had a connection to the community, able to represent the communities and to be a voice and to be a translator of these legal issues. I ultimately left in 2009 after 4 years at NRDC and went to Howard to run their environmental law program and teach environmental law. I did that fundamentally because at that point I had been in this space for about 10 years. And I could count on one hand the people of color who were sitting in the room when we were having important legal and policy conversations. And that was absolutely unacceptable to me. And I figured the best place that I can spend my energies is in a place where I can be helping people understand the importance of getting involved in this work and being people of color in this space, and being honest that it's tough, right? Like, this is a space that needs that's going to need some beating into submission. And that was back in 2009. I've been doing various kinds of work since then. It was at Howard for a long time, was in the Obama administration at DOJ, and am now at Earthjustice as VP of Litigation for the Healthy Communities Program, and I get the immense privilege of being able to direct lots of resources, and many of those resources to communities and to the benefit of communities.
Thank you so much, Patrice. And last but definitely not least, Kristi.
Yeah, hi, thank you so much, Elise, and thank you for this meeting. Thank you to Jacoby and Jan Michael and everyone that organized this and put this together. I know it takes a lot, and similar to what Andrés was saying earlier, like I'm happy that we solved the problem of getting into this Zoom meeting, and if we can solve this problem, it gives me hope that we can solve all the problems that exist before us. And so I'm just really grateful to be here. And so as was already said earlier, I'm Kristi Pullen Fedinick, and now the Chief Science Officer at NRDC. So NRDC's top scientist, and how the question of how I got into this, really in some ways I would say it was either by accident or by fate, and so maybe those two things are exactly the same. But my scientific research for a really long time focused on infectious diseases, particularly RNA viruses and other pathogens, and so that's really relevant for this time right now. But as I was going into my postdoctoral research, or even doing the research as an undergrad and graduate student, one of the things I worked on tuberculosis for my graduate thesis, and TB, or the tuberculosis bacterium, is tuberculosis is the most common pathogen in the world. So 1 out of every 4 people is latently infected with TB. But one of the things I was doing in the lab was trying to come up with drugs in order to fight this this pathogen that was impacting so many people. But one of the things that really perplexed me was that even though 2 billion people are latently infected with this pathogen, very few of them die. And so really wanting to understand what it was that led to that. And, there was research that was done by W.E.B. Du Bois and others at the, early 1900s that said, the 2 things that were necessary or most common for people that were dying from TB at that time were the presence of the bacteria and poverty. And so really seeing that it's not just this biological entity that's leading to people dying from something, it's really all of the other things that go into creating structures in which we have poverty, in which poverty is not alleviated at the same pace in some communities over others, that really led me into various paths that ultimately led me into the environmental space. I really wanted to be able to work on have applied science, servant science, being out there in the world, helping the communities that most needed it. And when I was coming out of my postdoc, just looking for policy jobs, got one in an environmental nonprofit and said, okay, cool, I'll give this a try. And what I found at that time, though, was just the relevance and the need for the kind of work and the kind of thinking that science brings to these problems. And so I was at another nonprofit for a few years before coming to NRDC, have been here for about 8. And, now, the role that I have allows me, similar to what Patrice was saying, to really shape and orient the work that we're doing, not only from a science perspective, but from a policy perspective as well. What are the questions that we're asking, right, in order to determine what are the solutions that we're trying to solve for? And science, particularly when coupled with policy and law, allow us to critique the world, see the world through multiple lenses, and then allow us to really be able to solve those problems that we're trying to solve together. So hopefully that answers the question quickly enough.
Not only does that answer the question, but it's the perfect segue to our next question. What I've heard from all of you all in terms of describing your start in or why you do what you do in this in the environmental field is that you saw a problem, but not only did you see a problem, that problem was coupled with your own passion and your own desires to make some change in the world. This conversation is about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Why is diversity, equity, and inclusion important to you? And how are you not just talking the talk, but walking the walk in terms of pushing for more diversity, equity, and inclusion within the organizations in which you work in or in the broader sphere of the environmental movement? How about we get started with Adrienne?
How did I know you were going to say that? So yeah, it's important to me. Actually, I grew up in Mobile, Alabama, and I remember as a child seeing my first Klansmen and all these sorts of things. And so justice was always an issue. And then as I got into other spaces, I was at Harvard, my postdoc first day, and a guy was yelling at me because I didn't empty his garbage, and it was because I was Black. It's the only reason. And so just little things like that, you reach a point where, not even reach a point, you realize that you've got to do something. And of course, Kristi and I teach the same course, and I know students always say, well, I'm just one person, but it only takes one, right, to start a movement. And I think that, just looking around at different positions that I've had, different jobs, both in private and a nonprofit world, and even as in the judicial system, that, certain populations are treated differently. And I just feel that it's our responsibility to call that out and to do what we can to make that better. I recently, people argue about using JEDI or DEIJ or whatever. And my issue is, I don't care what you call it, as long as you address it. We're not going to get stuck on, the communities like JEDI, but, the supremacists, the others like DEIJ for no reason other than because they didn't think of JEDI first. And so I guess I'm going to wrap this up. The main reason that I believe so strongly in fairness is because, as a person from the South, grew up in a community where there was pollution, and as a person who met and worked with community members and students and people, and still do, and seeing it firsthand, there comes, you've got to, I've seen communities push and push for years and years and years. And it's just frustrating, but frustrating to the point of action. And so it's just about being passionate about it because you believe in doing the right thing, and that we all deserve equal treatment, fair treatment. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think what you're saying is that someone told you that that's the way it is, and you said, but that's not the way it has to be. And that's a very important motivation, for this work. I say that from Tuskegee, Alabama, where I sit right now, in my hometown. So I understand. How about two more responses to this question? Why is diversity, equity, and inclusion important to you? How about Andrés?
Sure, not a problem. Adrienne, so nice to hear your response and hear a little bit about your background. But the way I see answering this question is, we're all a collection of our experiences. So if you would have asked me, when I was younger or midway through my career, kind of what does this mean to you, I would have answered differently. At different parts, I would have said it's what I want to do and how I view what I want to do for a career, or how the jobs I'm taking are going right now in my life. It's really about my daughters and seeing what kind of future, and wanting a better future for them, and a future in which we are much further along on these critical issues, and where we should have been a long time ago. I want to take 2 steps forward and no steps back on this. I want us to be working on this, so when they enter the workforce or they're going through school, I want this to be something that we are all working on and striving for and putting as a priority. One of your questions, Elise, is kind of how do you walk the walk and talk the talk? Well, one of the things we do at Green 2.0 is, last August, around the time I started, we put together a fellowship program exactly for youth, where we mentor youth. We give them something great to put on their resume. We're not just saying, because so many times along the road, I would go and talk, and they'd say, well, what's on your resume? What's your work experience? And I'm like, I'm trying to get some right now. And it was always a wall. And so one of the things at Green 2.0 is, one, we're giving them an opportunity to put something on their resume, to have that real life experience. They use our networks, but most importantly, it's that we pay them for their time. I would rather not start a fellowship if we weren't going to pay a young person for their time, because everyone deserves credit. They shouldn't have to put their own money into getting these experiences, because that in any field is where we're seeing people of color come across a big wall. When folks have to pay to get this experience, it's impossible when you're either working other jobs or when you don't come from a privileged background to say, oh, well, I'll pay my own money to live somewhere and put it on Metro cards, et cetera. And the organization that you're at is like, we're not going to give you anything for your time spent here. And so we pay them what I like to think is a very fair stipend. We pay each fellow for 3 months of work, $6,000. And they get that experience. And that to me is walking the walk and talking the talk, and not just looking at other foundations and organizations and saying, you should be doing this, but we're not going to do it. So we are doing that. And that is one way in which we are doing that. So thank you.
Thank you. And we'll take one more response. Is there someone who would like to respond to this question? Okay, Kristi.
Yeah, so I didn't get to say this in the last response too. I mean, I think that, so I grew up in Prince George's County, Maryland, in PG County, right? And went to the University of Maryland, Baltimore County for undergrad as a Meyerhoff scholar. So folks that, from Maryland would probably know about that. And I didn't realize that, Black people weren't in the majority really until I went to graduate school in California, and was shocked by the fact that people saw me as other. And, I operate, under the principle and philosophy that to whom much is given, much is required. And going into a space and realizing that 0.9% of the graduate population at UC Berkeley was Black, opened my eyes to the fact that there was a problem. It helped me then see PG County, which for me was this amazing experience, being able to grow up in, a majority Black place with, a lot of economic diversity, philosophical diversity, to see that it was an outlier, and to see that in relative to the rest of the country, especially again, if we look at the COVID situation, that we weren't doing that well. And so diversity, equity, and inclusion, the JEDI is important to me, because ultimately, if you want to solve a problem, and then being able to identify the ways in which those problems are manifest, for whom those problems are manifesting, and if we take a population health approach, for example, being able to shift the health of an entire population based on the interventions that you're doing for those that are most vulnerable, the only way in which to operate is to have justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion centered in your work.
Most definitely. And I just want to pass this to Leslie. Leslie, would you like to answer this question as well?
Sure. I mean, it takes I've been very blessed. I highly recommend, I come from a small family that's very supportive of me. And my dad still doesn't really understand what I'm doing, but as long as I'm gainfully employed, he's good with it. And so, but it's really what's so weird about the nonprofit environmental movement is that they see that it's bad to have monocultures out in the environment, but they don't have a problem with the monoculture that's in their organizations. And I do get a little uncomfortable when we just talk about the big greens. I think that also, nonprofit land in general has had this issue, right? And so it's very, it's just not, we're not going to be able to, it's very important. It's, some people call it mission critical. So I just think that it's life. I just think that, life is much more interesting when you have diverse and different kinds of people, philosophies, ideas. I'm trying to think of, I'm a curious person. And so I think you just become stale and irrelevant if you do not work on making sure that there's a constant flow of interchange and ideas and different kinds of people. I've done a lot, I've done a lot of mentoring, I've done a lot of recruiting. I hired the first all-Black team at the Sierra Club. And we are now working very hard to make sure our volunteer structure and our chapter, we have chapters and we have chapter directors that are now African-American and Latino and Asian American. And we've had done a very good job on the gender side for white women, but when you have intersectional identities, it's been tough. And the nonprofit sector is just a microcosm of our larger society, no better, no worse. It's not special. And so our larger society comes out of our history. We had white supremacist roots. Our organization, Circle, is 128 years old. So we had white supremacist roots, just like 128-year-olds, they were white supremacists. And, you know, our founder took Teddy Roosevelt out to the woods that became Yosemite. In order to do that, you had to kick the people out who were living there. Who was living there? The indigenous people. You know, this is the World Parks movement. There are all kinds of land claims all over the world. You go to Kruger National Park in South Africa and these other parks, there are people sitting outside the park gates fighting for their land because they got kicked out. This is the conservation movement writ large has this, you know, we can talk all day about this. So it is essential to the survival of our planet. It is essential to our souls and our psyche. And because when you protect and our cultures, if you protect the natural environment, you protect the cultural environments, right? And I feel the same way about my Katrina experience with Patrice, is that culture down there is so special. You know, I know there's a running battle between the New Orleans people and the Mobile people, between who has Mardi Gras. I know this, Adrienne, okay? And all right, but I know it's Mobile. I've been there. I know. So, you know, to protect these environments, all right, from the ravages of capitalism, and you know, now the climate disruption, the threat multiplier. So it's essential to our life on Earth that we have as much diversity and inclusion on all levels.
Most definitely. I always compare it to building a house, and no one builds a house with just a hammer. You need screws and screwdrivers and power tools. You need a number of different tools. And I think that it's just vitally important that we use the diversity of tools, minds, lived experiences in making, you know, plans and decisions. And decisions are all made by people. So we can look to specific people to understand why something is the way it is in the world. You know, there's a report that has detailed this. In 2014, the Green 2.0 report on the state of diversity in environmental organizations was influential in creating space to talk about how the environmental movement has failed Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities. 6 years later, what other reports have been released? And what significant changes, if any, have been made related to diversity? I'll give this question to Andrés about what changes have been made in the past 6 years since this report came out, and what are the gaps that still need to be filled in relation to addressing some of the recommendations of this report?
Yeah, no, thank you for asking that question. Obviously, Green 2.0 has published a report since then. Every year, our annual report card that looks at the top 40 foundations, top 40 organizations, and looks to see, first off, are organizations and foundations being transparent? And then second, we then look for those who are transparent. Are they doing better year to year when it comes to their hiring practices? Are they doing better putting people of color on their boards? And so that's been the report that's happened year after year since 2014. And I'll take last year's findings real quick before we get into what's happening next. Last year, we had 37 out of 40 NGOs be transparent. That to me is a win. That to me says in some way we as a group looking to be and push transparency, we are doing better. Nonprofits are being better, and they're saying, yes, we will take that first step. We will be transparent and let folks know publicly. I personally think, why wouldn't in 2020 or 2021, why wouldn't all groups be transparent? But listen, we're doing this one step at a time. And if we have 37 out of 40, I find that to be successful. And then you look at the foundations, and in last year's report card, 11 out of 40 foundations were transparent. That to me is the opposite of success. That is to me saying this sector, this foundation sector, does not want to participate. And so we have to take a step back and say, and what's happening here? Why aren't foundations being transparent? And then we look at nonprofit groups and say, yes, they are being transparent, which is great. But then we take a deeper dive and then we look at, are they doing better though? And they're not. In some ways, when it comes to adding staff, they are adding staff at a slow rate. But where the biggest problem lies is with senior staff. With senior staff, you are seeing people of color not jumping to that senior level. They're staying at that junior entry level, and that's a big problem. When you're not seeing staff, senior staff being added, what does that tell you about the organization? Why are these organizations refusing to add senior staff, refusing to add in a bigger rate board members of color? That's where I'm like, there's something going on here. That's not good. Let's jump ahead. I came in and I said, everything that has been done with this report is great, but there's always a chance to tighten things up, to shake things up and shake up the system. And so here's what we're doing for the 2021 report that comes out in November. And I couldn't be more excited if you can't already tell. In 2021, I have dropped the top 40 because I personally don't believe in the top 40. Because if you're number 41, Adrienne, what are you saying? You're saying, phew, thank goodness. I don't have to report. I'm okay. I will pass it along, and there's no accountability. So what I want to do and what we are doing is we're doubling the number of NGOs we're looking at to 80. So in the 2021 report, we're looking at 80 organizations. And more importantly, since we're doing away with the top 40, we have asked small groups, medium groups, large groups. So it's not, Leslie, just the big greens. We're taking a look at everyone. And we're looking at and saying, be transparent. Show us what's going on. Tell us and show other organizations that it can be done at all levels. I don't want, Elise, any excuses. I don't want an organization to come to us and say, Andrés, we're too small and so we can't report. We're growing and we're in the middle of a bunch of things, too much for us. Or we're so big, we don't even know how to begin doing this. Nonsense, nonsense, nonsense. And I will not stand for those excuses. So we're really excited in 2021, as I said, we're pushing the limits, we're doubling the numbers, we're going to a bunch of different groups we've never talked to and said, let's all be in this together. We all need to be transparent, we all need to work together, and we all need to then see success together. And so I'm hoping that this new way of doing this report will make others want to join in. We now have an opt-in option. So if you're not even part of that 80, which Patrice's organization is, but if Patrice wasn't, they could easily opt in and they could say, Andrés, we really want to participate. We're not part of that 80, but we're in. So we are excited. We're taking a deeper dive this year. We're asking questions around retention. I just saw Joyce ask that question. So yes, we are looking at retention, not just hiring. We're opening up and taking a deeper dive into the questions this year. So stay tuned in November for that report.
Yeah, that's really phenomenal. It's been phenomenal how this report and just having this data has really opened people's eyes to what's happening and to, you know, where there's leadership, where there's not, where there's diversity, where there's not, and who is and who isn't being transparent. I'm kind of wondering, how has this report been used within organizations? This question goes out to one of our other panelists. Have you all seen this report used within your organizations? Is there a discussion of this report, these findings in your organizations? Has it sparked change? If so, you know, how? I'll just open this to any panelists that would like to answer that question if you have seen this in your organization.
Well, I'll start. I helped get this going. I'm thrilled that, I don't know if Andres knows this, I'm thrilled that it's gotten to where it is and that the Rabin group picked it up. When I was looking for a job back in 2004, I was interviewing in environmental groups and I kept a spreadsheet. And I was having a miserable time getting back in after I had left my last environmental group to work on what became the Carrie Edwards campaign. And I can't even talk about that with this and not be sober. And people were making me have 4, 5, 6 interviews. I kept a spreadsheet. And so I went to a friend who was an employment lawyer from law school. And she said, well, I wanted to file a complaint to the DC Human Rights Commission. And she said, well, you need $10,000 to do a study. And of course I didn't have it. So I made up the job at the Sierra Club and I got into the Sierra Club with the help of a friend and the director of EJ at the time. And the Sierra Club had an EJ program, and they were also doing a voluntary dismantling racism program, which was voluntary and people had to do it on their own time and dime and it wasn't supported. And so years later, I had this opportunity and to get this study done, and I got our then ED, Michael Brune, to commit $10,000. And then because Michael Brune committed $10,000, we went to Earthjustice and got then ED Trip Van Noppen to commit $10,000. And we had $20,000 to get Dr. Docetta Taylor to do that first study. So that's how that happened. And I'd always thought about that $10,000 figure. And that's how it's happened. And then Rob Rabin, had the experience of, I was there, it was maybe you were there too, Patrice, years ago, there was an LCV gala at Union Station, and the keynote speaker was, oh gosh, what's her name? The Obama.
Valerie Jarrett.
Sorry?
Valerie Jarrett.
Valerie Jarrett, thank you, gosh. Valerie Jarrett was a keynote speaker. And she said something, and they were I didn't see Bob Rabin at the time, but in that one, there was like probably 2,000 people there, and I counted the Black people on one hand, okay? And Valerie Jarrett was the keynote speaker, and she said something, and they started booing her. I mean, it was horrible that they were booing this Black woman, the Obama's best friend, okay? And it was just outrageous. And Bob Rabin was in that meeting, was in that gala, and he had very good friends with Valerie Jarrett. And that's how he got going on this. And he has been housing this and supporting this. And I just want to give all praise to the Rabin group. Our good friend Danielle Dean was doing this. And then we had up there Whitney Tome. So I'm delighted it's still going on. We use this report. But I have to say, a lot of the changes in the organization have become because in the Sierra Club, because we have 2 unions in the Sierra Club, and the young people of color pushed hard to get these unions. And I'm very proud of them. It wasn't for the leadership changes, but this report has helped a lot, and it's helped our union. And our union has in turn helped UCS and Greenpeace develop their own unions to get at this there's been exploitation and terrible abuse. And now there's a big pay equity study. We're doing our Black Action team is driving a pay equity study now. So this report has been crucial for this work to help to keep us accountable, and also help us look internally at the things that needed to happen within the Sierra Club.
Thank you for that response, Leslie. Patrice, were you going to respond?
Yeah, I was hoping to get a chance to respond to this.
Okay.
If that's all right. I was there at the beginning of Green 2.0 as well, with Leslie and a handful of other folks launching this. And, there was some skepticism at the beginning of this process, or especially for folks who'd been through this ringer, at least a couple of times before, about whether it was worth the emotional energy and time and effort to to take another run at this. But we thought it was, and I would say, looking, if we could look forward from that moment and see how far it has come, we would be overjoyed that it did not fall apart. It did not wither away, and that Green 2.0 is going strong, and that other organizations have jumped in and helped to advance this as well. And Andrés, it's great to have you there and to have you really thinking about what's next, what's the next step here. So I want to make a couple of really quick observations that folks have alluded to, but I want to put a really fine point on it, because this kind of transparency is absolutely vital. It is absolutely critical. The only way you accomplish change is if you have some kind of accountability. And the only way to have accountability is with transparency. And I want to put even a finer point on this idea of accountability. One of the reasons that the environmental movement had been able to stay so insular and so homogenous for so long was an absence of transparency, not just into the composition of the groups and the composition of the boards and the composition of the leadership, but also into the kinds of decision making that happen, how decisions get made within the organization, how hiring happens. Any of us who've been around this field for any period of time can remember the time when the way people got jobs in this movement is because they were friends with the person who had the job in the organization, and that's how it happened. That, Leslie's description of her experience having interview after interview and not getting job after job was not by accident. It was because the processes within the organizations were absolutely opaque, and it was a good old boy network, and that's how things function. And that's why every organization looked the way it looked at the beginning of the process of creating Green 2.0. And this accountability is critical. It's critical to the public-facing audience, right? The people who interact with these various organizations, whether it's as potential partners or clients or other constituencies. But it's also really critical to the existing staff at the organizations. There is that all of the things I was describing was just as opaque to a staff person at one of these organizations 10 years ago as it was to someone out in the public. And so the idea of having this information available, having this information being freely shared, and then providing it, which then provides an opportunity not just for the public to look at it and the constituents to look at it, but for the staff at the organizations to look at it, for the funders to look at it, for an opportunity for external and internal examination of where are we, how are we doing, what are we doing, and why are we doing it, and is it good enough? Absolutely critical, right? Without that, you don't get progress. Without that, you don't have the opportunity to hold others or hold yourselves accountable to the kind of change that we really need to see. And I not only, I want to present, I think there's both the opportunity for people to participate in the Green 2.0, the process of reporting through that process, but it doesn't need to stop there, right? Each of our organizations can report on their own and be transparent in real time. We all have websites. We all have places that we can share what we're doing, how we're doing it, and in a way that will drive our own motivation to be better at what we're trying to do here. And I would point folks, to Earthjustice's attempt to do that on our webpage, and I'll share a link in the chat of the diversity page that we've made a public page, and we share all of the information that we have about our own status of of our staff at the organization. This is critical. And I want to make one last really quick point, which is the other issue here, which goes to what Andrés was saying earlier about funders. The other reason why diversity is so critical here and transparency is so critical here is money, 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 right? The money drives the work. And if the money's not available for the people on the front lines who need the resources to get the work done, then it's not going to happen the way that it needs to, and funders need to step up.
Yes, Andrés.
I can just jump in for 2 seconds. One, I just wanted to comment, Patrice, awesome, excellent answer, obviously. And accountability. Accountability has consequences. What have we seen in the last 1.5 to 2 years? Union Concerned Scientists, Audubon, other organizations, their leadership has had to step down because they are not taking this seriously. They're not prioritizing what's happening internally. And if they continue to do that, and if there are other organizations, and there unfortunately will be, that continue not to take this seriously, they will also face the same consequences. Your actions have consequences. And then, yeah, Leslie and Patrice, you know, obviously you being at the very beginning of Green 2.0, you know, we're doing all of this work on your shoulders and all of your experiences and hard work that you and so many put forward. And though we're not part of the Raven group any longer, we haven't been over the last year, you know, we are so grateful to Robert and to amazing leaders who helped push this and get this going. So thank you, Elise.
Thank you.
So I'll be quick, Elise, I promise. I just wanted to acknowledge something that when we talk about, you know, one of the reasons that diversity, the word diversity has been anathema to a lot of Black people, maybe other people of color, is that, well, Black people specifically, is that for the longest time, diversity meant anything but Black, any other person of color but Black. And so one of the things that Green 2.0 did for me, and I love Green 2.0, I love the reaction when it comes out. I love the anticipation that I see in people, in groups, is that it did what any great report does, is it generates questions. And the question for me was, okay, so this organization says that they're diverse. What does that mean? Right? How many Black people are you hiring? And yeah, somebody did ask about retention, but how many are you even hiring? Because if you're thinking diversity means anything other than white, then anything other than Black, then we have a problem. And I think that that's what people have seen for a long time, and people still see. And so I just want to keep that in mind. And I always say, and Andrés, you weren't at Green Leadership Trust when I used to send emails and say, yeah, but what about breaking it down, and what does diversity mean, and how many Black people did you hire, how many Spanish speaking people did you hire, you know, and ask more specific questions, which I know takes a lot of time, but it's so very important, right? Because that's when you're talking about transparency and making advancements and actually walking the walk, right? Walking the talk, as they say. So I just want to say that.
Adrienne, we're taking a deep dive this year more than ever. We're taking a real deep dive, and I think you're going to be pretty happy with how far we've gone down and how we've broken things down more so than ever before.
I think that's great, because we need to look at the beginning of in some instances, the beginning of the process and where we are now, because there have been a lot of changes in organizations, you know, in the last, you know, from the beginning when people started becoming diverse to what that looks like a few months later, right? In some instances. So.
Yeah, and I was a student at University of Michigan pursuing my master's of public health and environmental health during this time that the first report came out in 2014. And it generated a lot of questions for me about where can I actually work in environmental health? What am I going to do when I finish this degree? And so this report, you know, even for students, is really telling about what the landscape of jobs and opportunity looks like for them in making decisions, particularly people of color, and making decisions about what we're going to do. All right, so we have about 20 minutes left. We have several questions left that I want to ask, and I wish I could ask all of them. But I'm going to ask you all for your brief responses to these next few so that we can cover this content. My next question is about really like the lived experience of being that diversity within an organization. So Kristi and Adrienne, you two are both phenomenal Black scientists within predominantly white organizations. You are, that diversity and hopefully there's equity in how you work, and perhaps you are included and the environment is inclusive. Maybe, maybe not. What has your experience been working within the organizations that you work in? Have there been challenges during your time there, and how have those been addressed? I'm sure that you all could spend 10 hours talking about your experience, but let's see if you can pack it into like 3 minutes each.
You want me to hop in here first, Elise? Yeah, I'm also happy for Adrienne to do this too. I think that, gosh, condensing it all into 3 minutes, the biggest challenges that I've found in this space, haven't actually, well, I mean, there's some challenges associated with the science in and of itself, right? So what people will consider to be valid questions to ask. And if there's, something that I want to do that's looking at disparities, that's saying that we need to understand the impacts of all of our policies on communities that are disproportionately impacted by, say, pollution in the environment and the intersection of the social determinants in that pollution, then oftentimes those become redirected to say, well, isn't that something that the EJ team should handle? Isn't that something that our equity colleagues should handle? And I think that division between what's scientific and seen as pure versus what's in the environment, too messy, isn't necessarily even available for critique and understanding. I think that disconnect is something that's quite challenging, actually, because I don't see those two things as being independent of each other. I think one of the biggest challenges, though, is the dual roles that you have to play as a Black person, let's say in a org like this, or an org like NRDC, but an org, any of these big greens. And that's doing the work that you were hired on to do. And Adrienne, touched on this a little bit earlier, and then doing the work to try to change the organization in order to make the organization better, and in order to make it better for people that are going to be coming, along with you and after you as well. And so, since my second day at NRDC, I've been involved in anything that was related to increasing the D, E, and I, right? And so Leslie and Patrice have already talked about the fact that they were at NRDC, and that troubles me, right? Rather than are at NRDC, and how amazing that would be to be able to work together with them at the same organization. And so, that work, though, has required, in addition to the 50, 60 hours, and I'm working on my project level work, right? And building a science enterprise at the organization, it required an additional 20 hours of work to be in meetings, to write proposals, to develop trajectories and pathways, and to push the organization in various ways. And that becomes unbelievably taxing. And so if I have colleagues that can do the same programmatic work, that 50, 60 hours, but they can spend their weekends with their kids, they can go on vacations, they can take that time off, it becomes something that at times feels unbearable, right? But then also feels completely necessary in order to create the structures that will make it so that others don't have to fight those same fights. And so one of the things I'm excited about, being in the position that I'm in now, is that I can try to create those environments, and to say, and to be that change that I want to be able to see, to say that, the types of questions we should be asking should be inclusive, the types of people we should be hiring should be inclusive, and I don't have to ask permission in order to do it. I can just try to do it. And even though that's one little piece, of this really large organization, my hope is that I can, be able to create those places, at least where, other students that are out there looking for places to do that environmental health, you can look at NRDC and say, that's the place I want to go. And so hopefully that was condensed enough. And Adrienne, I'll pass it to you.
Yeah, and the first thing I'm going to say is, imagine that I've just put everything that Kristi said in bold, because she hit everything on the head. And to add to that, yes, indeed, it is a challenge in an organization. I mean, when I came to UCS, everybody called it the Union of Caucasian Scientists, right? And people still do, for whatever reason. And I think in an organization, it is tiring, and it can be in any organization, it can be sad when you see good people leave. And which is weird for me to say since I'm leaving, right, in 8 days, but I've seen good people leave recently, just as if it were a march out the door. And that's sad, right? Because you're just really, that says something. It says something about the fact that people are tired or dispirited or just, just need a break, right? But I think that in addition to that, there have been some change. Oh my goodness, people who have in the past not spoken up but wanted to are now empowered to do that, or realize that they already had the power to do that, right? And for a number of people, like their favorite quote and my favorite quote is Angela Davis. I would know what is it? I will no longer accept the things that I cannot change. And I'm misquoting it, and I hope she's not listening. But now it's time to make a change, and we do that. And I've seen some things change. I've seen the problem, I think, for a lot of people is that it hasn't happened at the speed of now, or the speed of us, and that's probably what generates this feeling that Kristi referred to of being just tired and actually very exhausted in the process. But that doesn't mean it's not worthwhile. It just means, thank God, there's fresh blood coming along to continue this, journey. So, yeah.
Yes, thank you. Thank you all so much for blazing a trail for people to come behind you. And, there's a lot more work to do, both within the context of these organizations and in creating our own places, places to work and to give new opportunities to others as well. With that being said, I want to hit one last question before we open this up to the audience. And this is just a quick 60-second response from everyone. What are your recommendations about how we can truly transform environmental organizations and scientific groups to be just, to be diverse, to be equitable, and to be inclusive? I think the ramifications of that are obviously powerful and dynamic. They literally change the world because we have different people making different decisions. But your 60-second response, what are your recommendations about how we can truly transform environmental and scientific organizations to be just, equitable, diverse, and inclusive? I will start with Patrice. 60 seconds.
All right, I've talked a lot, so I'll keep it even shorter than that. I think one way to do that is to allow the people of color in the organizations to make the important decisions about direction and policy in ways that we're not doing now. We will quickly see that when you ask different people what are the problems we should be solving and what are the solutions we should be choosing, you're going to get different answers. Both when you're looking internally at how an organization operates and when you look externally about what an organization should be doing.
Thank you. Who's next? Okay, Adrienne.
So I definitely agree with Patrice, and also in the work that we do, if we ask the questions, what does it affect, and it's our place to help them work with them to determine what needs to be done, right? And so we need to make sure that we have everybody at the table and recognize that stakeholders means everybody, and that we're, and I think we need to lose our preconceived ideas, hierarchical ideas when it comes to race and race relations. So, yeah.
Yes. Kristi, Leslie, either of you? Kristi, all right.
Yeah, I thought you were calling on me. That's why I unmuted.
Okay, perfect. No, perfect.
Really quickly, I mean, I think, to piggyback on what Patrice and Adrienne have said, I think it's more than allow people of color to make these decisions. I think, we've had a number of presidential searches for a lot of these organizations in the last few years. And so if we want to, affect the kind of change we want to see, put Patrice, put Adrienne, put Leslie, put Jacoby, put Bernice, put all of these folks that have these extraordinary skill, extraordinary knowledge, passion, and direction that will lead us in those ways into those positions.
Yes, perfect. Leslie, 60 seconds.
Yeah, that's great, Kristi. And I would have loved to have stayed at NRDC, as Vernice knows. I tried my best, but my contract ended back in the day. I think that one of the very few silver linings to this pandemic, or syndemic, as Vernice says, is that there's been more, because of there's been a democratization of access. And so we have the these organizations, they were monopolistic. And so since you couldn't break in, you were treated a certain kind of way, and the communities that they, were also treated, as a side thought, afterthought. Now that everybody can get on Zoom in the administration, everybody can get up into the funders, not everybody, but better than ever through Zoom and through the computer and the internet, and you see a more global response to these issues. So it's not so, I think part of that pressure now is affecting my organization. And we're going through a big transition right now, and it's playing out publicly. And our interim ED is a Chinese American man. Our managing attorney is now Latina. I'm up in there, and we are seeing this change. Okay, so definitely need your support. We need to support each other. That's the other thing that's really, really important, is that we support and we protect each other as we are doing this, and we bring folks with us, like we've been saying. But I think it's this external pressure, all right, and the democratization of everything through social media and the internet, and that these organizations cannot survive this old way. And finally, the financial pressure. There's other ways to fund, and aside from just going to one big daddy or mommy funder, there's creative ways to fundraise. That also pressure is making the change. And so I think it's very exciting. I'm very optimistic, actually, even though a lot, I don't want to see any, the suffering is terrible, but I think we get it through this fire, we have to change, and I think it's going to be changed for the better. So it's exciting to be part of this and to be with you guys today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, either you got to change or you're not relevant. One of those
Right.
At this point. Last word, Andrés.
Yeah, I think that, we need to make sure that we're not just talking, but that we're actually putting this in writing within organizations and foundations. Put it into your strategic mission, put it into what counts, make it so that even when the folks pushing internally are no longer there, their words, their ambition, their thoughts will live on, and so that organizations and foundations have to look at themselves in the mirror and say, how can we be better? How can we not just take a conversation and say, oh, we had it, so we're good, but actually say, this is part of who we are, this is part of our mission, this is what we need to aim and strive for. So putting it into writing, making sure that staff knows that this is crucial and that this is important to the leadership, making sure that we're not just saying, oh, we have someone in a DEI position within our organization, so we're good there. We've checked that box, because that's insanity. We need to make sure that people of color are in every sort of position, whether it's research, whether it's staff, writers, comms, VPs, finance, HR. We can't just look at DEI and say that position's been filled by a person of color, so we are good. We don't have to do anything else. So we need to push. It's great, and I, just like Leslie just said, I am hopeful as well. But let's not kid ourselves. Over this last year or two, so many organizations are facing consequences. We are nowhere where we need to be. It continues to happen. It has not stopped. If anything, more and more and more organizations are showing publicly what is happening internally, and it's not pretty. It is not a pretty picture. Do not kid yourself. Things are not working the way they should. We need change. We need change at leadership, on the board. We need to make sure that future generations stay passionate about being environmentalists and want to come into this field and work and bring their passion.
Yes, thank you. And the one thing I can thank you all for is for bringing your passion, to the work that you do, whether it's been in the environmental organizations or at academic institutions, to all the places in which you've brought it. Because as Adrienne said before, one person really can make a difference in any field, whether that's in your city, your town, your country, around the globe. And so what I want to do now is open up the floor for a few questions from the audience. I think we're going to put questions in the chat, take a few questions from the chat from the audience before we close out. So I'll take the most recent question first because it's in front of me. The most recent question is from Leah. And this question is, how can organizations report to Green 2.0 if they're opting in? Is it possible to do that online?
You can, well, yes, thank you for that question. You can go to our website. We have an info email, and you can send in your request. You can reach out to us there. We recently had on Twitter and on social media a call out asking any organization and foundation that wanted to be part of the opt-in to reach out to us. So we are always looking for new organizations. We're always looking for new foundations. And as many of you know, like Adrienne, Patrice, Leslie, and Kristi, we are always looking and happy to have informed new partnerships, because if there's been one center message around today is we need to work together, we need to form partnerships, and we need to do this as a team.
Yeah, your answer is a perfect segue to this next question. I'm not sure who this is from, but the question is that we are fractured. We are a fractured community of advocates, leaders, educators, and etc. What can we do to build national momentum and a national agenda around our priorities? That's the question. I'll take that from one panelist.
So I'll just go quickly. So, and I respect that the person said that we're fractured, because I don't feel that way. I feel that we might be perceived that way because of historical racism and the practices that have gone on before. But I think that just the message that came out of here, working together and unifying, is the answer to that question, is because we've all been working for the issues in our community, and rightly so. And and when we join coalitions and we share stories, people realize that, hey, I'm dealing with the same issues. So we just need more of that. And we need to call a thing out, call it a thing, and that's with the funders, with others who aren't giving this matter the attention it deserves. JEDI, or whatever you want to call it, the attention it deserves. And it's about stepping up and speaking out is what it is. So we're not fractured. I know it feels that way. We sometimes feel broken and all of those things, but that's only because we need to gather our support system around us and lean on them from time to time. So.
And that question leads perfectly into my last question. I really wish I could ask more. But this question is, for those of us who are lower level staff or volunteers who don't have as much power, and I'll say everyone has power, you were ordained with God-given power, but for those who don't have as much institutional power, what can we do to uplift these issues to our largely white environmental organizations?
Organize yourselves. Okay, it is extra. And you have to build your allies, okay, internally and externally on every level. So try to find that one board member who, or that one external person, or, or let me know. My email's leslie.fields@sierraclub.org. But you have to, don't get isolated, okay? And what's that great quote from Zora Neale Hurston? You have to speak your pain, otherwise people will kill you and think you enjoyed it, right? And don't keep it to yourself, it's not healthy. Find that balance in your life, your family, your friends, your outside activities. But you've got to organize internally. Like I said, we're a much larger organization, but we have, we had to have unions. It got that bad, okay? And I'm in the leadership. I had nothing to do with it, but I had people on my teams who helped start them. So supported them that way. But don't get picked off, and you have a right to have a supportive environment where you can thrive, all right, and meet and have professional development goals and not get beaten down. But happy to talk more about this offline.
Yeah, can I just add, I think it's really important to remember, and this goes to a point that I think both Leslie and Adrienne made earlier. We are all, and not just us, but this is the group of people who are so active in this space and have been for a long time, spend a lot of time talking with people and guiding people and providing advice. And you should view us as a part of your community and reach out to us. And we, and not just the 6 people on this call, but there's a whole host of folks who want to be there to support people who are fighting this fight. So view us as a part of your extended community and take advantage of that.
Thank you. I just want to thank this entire panel for the wealth of knowledge you all have provided today. This entire conference is about addressing and tackling so many environmental issues, from NEPA to water quality to air quality to climate change. But we all do this within our respective professional settings. And as we are addressing, these issues and trying to make the world a better place, a healthier place, a safer place for others, it's important that we're healthy and safe, that we feel important as we do that. And the work that you all are doing to make organizations more just, more equitable, more inclusive, to really improve these organizations for their benefit too, and for the benefit of the world, for the impact that we have, is just so critical. So I want to thank all of our panelists for your contributions today to this conversation, for the work that you all do in the world. We really appreciate you all, and hope that you all are able to enjoy your evening as we conclude today's conference.
Thank you, Elise. Great job. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, let's get a round of applause, in our rooms by ourselves for this great panel, and for our great moderator, Elise. Thank you very, very much. I'm going to go ahead and close us out for the day because Dr. Wilson is fulfilling his NEJAC duties. That's the National Environmental Justice Advisory Council. They're having public commenting all this week, so he couldn't be here for the closeout, but he will be back again. We'll all be back tomorrow morning. One thing before we end today, so we have set up a speed networking session that's going to kick off at 5:10. It's a 30-minute session. I think the poll is still, oh, he is here. I feel like this is deja vu. I feel like this happened last year. But I don't know, Dr. Wilson, if you wanted to give any final words, but I will say that I'm really grateful for this great kickoff to today. I want to definitely thank our sponsors once again. That's the Environmental Defense Fund, Maryland League of Conservation Voters in Cheeseville, Maryland, Earthjustice, the Sierra Club, the Maryland Sierra Club, Union of Concerned Scientists, Chesapeake Bay Trust, the Baha'i Chair at the University of Maryland, Choose Clean Water Coalition, Green 2.0, the Center for Health and Environmental Justice, NAMITI, Johns Hopkins Environmental Health and Engineering Department, the Rachel Carson Council, the Socially Responsible Agriculture Project, SRAP, and the University of Maryland School of Public Health. Thank you all for making this possible. Attendees, thanks for hanging out with us as we go through our growing pains with HUVA. I promise tomorrow will be a lot smoother. Dr. Wilson, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Yan. Thanks, Elise. It's great to see all the mentees grow up and doing things. So yeah, Elise was in a mentee in our lab some years ago. So appreciate that great moderating that you've done. I thank you for the great panelists again. Y'all are holding it down, putting in work, and really, making change on the inside and on the outside. Thank you, like I said, to Yan. Yan's the man earlier in my comments today. So thank you again for for being the MC in my absence. I gotta get back to knee jack in about 5 minutes because this is my last knee jack meeting actually. But really wanted to say appreciate everyone participating. As Ian has already said, we have a big day tomorrow. We're gonna have our Siege lecture with Dr. Cecilia Martinez with the Council of Environmental Quality. So I hope everyone comes back tomorrow and have a good night, get some rest because we're gonna have a long day tomorrow. So appreciate you and hope to see you tomorrow. Thank you again.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Y'all take care. Have a good evening.